I've spent most of my life pretending to be other people. That's the peculiar nature of my profession. You step into someone else's shoes, borrow their voice, wear their troubles like a coat, and after a while, if you're not careful, you start to wonder which version of yourself is the real one. But there are moments, rare and unexpected, when something happens that cuts right through all that pretense and shows you exactly who you are. I want to tell you about one of those moments. It was 1978, I believe. Maybe 79. The years blur together when you've lived as many as I have. I was in Chicago for some business or another. The details of why I was there have faded, but what happened that evening remains as clear as if it occurred yesterday. I had finished my meetings and decided to walk back to my hotel rather than take a cab. There's something about walking in a city at dusk, the way the light changes and the streets come alive with people heading home, that always appealed to me. It reminds you that the world doesn't revolve around your particular concerns. I was passing through one of those neighborhoods that exists in every American city, the kind that prosperity forgot. The storefronts were tired, the sidewalks cracked, and the people moved with that particular weariness that comes from working too hard for too little. I wasn't lost, exactly, but I had wandered further from the main streets than I had intended. That's when I saw him. An elderly black man sitting alone on a bus stop bench. He wore a gray suit that had seen better decades, carefully pressed but threadbare at the elbows. His shoes were polished to a high shine despite the cracks in the leather. There was a small suitcase at his feet, the old-fashioned kind with brass clasps. He sat perfectly still, hands folded in his lap, staring straight ahead with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something made me stop. I couldn't tell you what, exactly. Maybe it was the dignity in his posture, the way he held himself as though he were waiting for an audience with someone important rather than a city bus. I walked over and sat down on the bench beside him. He glanced at me, then looked away. There was no recognition in his eyes, which was a relief. Sometimes being recognized can be a barrier rather than a bridge. "Beautiful evening," I said. He nodded slowly. "It is that." We sat in silence for a while. I've learned over the years that silence can be more eloquent than words, that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is simply your presence. The streetlights were coming on, one by one, and the sky had turned that particular shade of purple that only appears in the space between day and night. "You're waiting for the bus?" I asked, though it was obvious. "The 47, he said. "Runs every 45 minutes this time of evening. Should be along directly. Moe's, going somewhere special?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "Going to see my son. He's in a hospital on the other side of the city. Been there 3 weeks now." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. He nodded again, still looking straight ahead. He was a teacher. Mathematics. 32 years at the same school. Coached the basketball team, too. Led them to the state championship twice. He paused. His mind is going now. Some days, he doesn't know who I am. Some days he thinks he's still teaching, gets agitated because he's late for class. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? The inadequacy of words in the face of real suffering is something you learn about in my profession. But it never gets easier. "I go every evening," he continued. "Take the 47 across town. Sit with him for visiting hours. Read to him sometimes, from the newspaper or whatever book I'm carrying. Talk to him about when he was a boy. The trouble he used to get into. The way he'd laugh." He smiled slightly. He was the kind of child who laughed with his whole body. Just pure joy coming out of him like light. "That's a beautiful thing," I said. "Going to see him like that. Every day." The old man turned and looked at me for the first time. really looked at me. His eyes were tired but clear, and there was something in them that I recognized. Something I had seen in my own father's eyes when I was young, before everything fell apart between my parents. It was a kind of fierce, unbreakable love. "You have children?" he asked. "5," I said. "3 from my first marriage, 2 from my second. Then you understand." "Yes," I said. "I do." And I did understand. More than he could know. I thought about my own sons, about the distance that had grown between us during the years when I was too consumed with my career to be the father they needed. I thought about the phone calls I had missed, the school plays I had arrived late to, the conversations I had cut short because there was always somewhere else I needed to be. I thought about how hard I had worked in recent years to repair those bonds, to be present in a way I hadn't been before. "My father and I said, surprising myself by speaking. "My parents divorced when I was just a boy, and I was shuffled between relatives, never quite belonging anywhere. For years I carried anger about that, resentment. I thought he had abandoned me." The old man listened without interrupting. "That's a rare quality, the ability to simply listen." "Later," I continued, "when I was grown and had children of my own, I started to understand things differently. Not to excuse what he did, but to see that he was just a man, flawed and struggling like the rest of us. He did the best he could with what he had. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it human." "That's wisdom talking," the old man said. "Takes a long time to get there. Too long sometimes." He nodded. "My boy, William, he was angry at me for years. I worked too much when he was growing up. 2 jobs, sometimes 3. Janitor at the school during the day, cleaned offices at night. Weekends, I did odd jobs for whoever would pay. I told myself I was doing it for him, for his future. But the truth is, I missed most of his childhood. By the time I stopped working so hard, he was already a man with his own life." "But you reconciled?" "Eventually. When his mother passed, 10 years ago now, something shifted between us. He started calling more, coming by on Sundays. We'd sit on my porch and talk about nothing in particular, just being together, making up for lost time, I suppose." He paused. "Now I go to him. Every evening. The bus takes 40 minutes, and sometimes I have to stand because there aren't enough seats. But I go, because that's what a father does. You show up. That's the whole thing, really. You just keep showing up." The bus came eventually, rumbling down the street with its lights blazing in the gathering dark. The old man picked up his suitcase and stood, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose body has begun to betray him. "It was nice talking with you," he said. "The pleasure was mine." I stood as well and reached into my wallet. "Here, please, take this." I held out $200. It was what I had on me. He looked at the money, then at me, and there was no gratitude in his expression, only a kind of gentle amusement. "No, thank you," he said. "I appreciate the thought, but I don't need it." "Please," I said. "For your son, for the hospital bills." He shook his head. "Son, I worked 53 years, saved my money, put my boy through college. I've got enough." He paused, studying my face with those clear, tired eyes. "You want to help? Go home and call your children." I put the money back in my wallet, feeling something I can only describe as chastened. Not humiliated. Nothing like that. Just reminded of something I should never have forgotten, that dignity is not something you can buy or give away. It belongs to each person, intrinsic and inalienable, and the best you can do is recognize it and honor it. "Thank you," I said, "for the conversation. Thank you for sitting with me." He touched the brim of an imaginary hat. a gesture from another era, and climbed onto the bus. I stood on that corner and watched the bus pull away, its taillights disappearing into the Chicago night. Then I walked to a payphone and called my son Stephen. It was late, but he answered. We talked for almost an hour about nothing in particular, just being together across the miles of wire that connected us. When I finally hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt whole. I never learned that old man's name. I never saw him again. But I think about him often, even now, all these years later. I think about him sitting on that bus, riding across the city to be with his son, who no longer recognizes him. I think about the suitcase at his feet, the polished shoes, the carefully pressed suit. I think about the quiet dignity of a man who had worked his whole life, who had made sacrifices and mistakes and reconciliations, who was still showing up every single day. Because that's what love requires. People ask me sometimes about the roles I've played, about Atticus Finch or the other characters I've had the privilege of bringing to life. They want to know what it's like to portray heroism, to embody moral courage. And I tell them that the real heroes aren't on movie screens. The real heroes are riding the 47 bus across Chicago to sit with a son who has forgotten them. The real heroes are the ones who keep showing up, day after day, without expectation of applause or recognition. I've spent my career playing men of principle. Men who stand up for what's right, who fight against injustice, who protect the vulnerable. Those stories matter. They remind us of what we can be, of the better angels of our nature. But the man at the bus stop taught me something that all those scripts never quite captured. He taught me that heroism isn't usually dramatic. It's quiet. It's daily. It's the unglamorous work of loving someone even when it's hard, even when it costs you, even when no one is watching. I went home after that trip to Chicago and looked at my life differently. I made changes, not dramatic ones, nothing that would make headlines. Just small adjustments in how I spent my time, who I prioritized, what I considered important. I started calling my children more. I started listening more carefully. I started showing up. That old man refused my money, but he gave me something far more valuable. He gave me a reminder that we are all connected, that every person we encounter has a story as rich and complex as our own, that dignity is the birthright of every human being. And he taught me that the measure of a life is not what you achieve or accumulate, but how you love, and whether you have the courage to keep loving even when it's difficult. I don't know what happened to that man or his son. I hope William lived long enough to have more good days than bad. I hope his father got to see those moments of recognition, those flashes when his boy remembered who he was and who loved him. I hope they had time. We never have enough time, you see. That's the one thing I've learned for certain in all my years. The days move faster than we expect, and before we know it, the people we love are gone, or changed, or far away. The only answer to that, the only defense against the cruelty of time, is to love fiercely and immediately, to say the things that need to be said, to make the phone calls, to take the bus across town, to sit on the bench beside someone and simply be present. That's what I think about now, when I'm asked to reflect on my life and career. Not the movies, not the awards, not the recognition. I think about the man at the bus stop. I think about his quiet dignity, his refusal of my money, his gentle instruction to call my children. I think about all the bus stops in the world, all the people sitting alone in the gathering dark, waiting for someone to sit down beside them and simply be human. If there's a message in any of this, I suppose it's that. Be human. Recognize the humanity in others. Show up. Keep showing up. And when you're tempted to think that your position, or your wealth, or your fame makes you special, remember that somewhere out there is an old man in a threadbare suit, riding a bus to see a son who no longer knows him. And he is doing something more heroic than anything you'll ever see on a movie screen. That's the story I wanted to tell you. Not because it's dramatic or exciting, but because it's true in the way that matters. It happened, and it changed me. And now I've passed it on to you. What you do with it is your own affair. But if you take nothing else from these words, take this. Call someone you love today. Tell them what they mean to you. Don't wait. The 47 bus won't wait forever.